The gaming industry is sick, horsemen. And this sickness is not technical. It's fear, a slow, creeping dread that coils itself around industries and studios until every single choice becomes a negotiation with the very thing that they're terrified of. A negotiation of compromise. Fear of outrage, fear of activists, fear of headlines, fear that they will become the next trending corpse on social media. Take a look at what's happening with Prince of Persia Remake that Ubisoft is currently engaged in. And tell me that this isn't a textbook example of the sickness that we know as fear. If you notice and compare the two protagonists that started off this entire Prince of Persia thing, we have our prince and our supporting character. Our prince looks less like a prince now and more of a forgettable background character. And take a look at what they did to our supporting character. These changes that we are seeing are examples of negotiated compromise. It is a sickness that plagues not only the gaming industry, but even the movies as well. Every single creative choice needs to be filtered through the risk radars that are instituted by these companies. Now, of the numerous reasons that may have contributed to Ubisoft actually doing this, one of them is what I call cultural risk. Now, let's first break down what we mean by cultural risk. When we talk about cultural risk, it is the fear that drives companies to not go against modern values. You see, in a society, there are things that are considered as taboo or that are considered as sacred that you're not allowed to go against. For the longest time, the culture was mostly controlled by the left. The left controlled media, entertainment, even law. Up until Trump came along, they were mostly the dominant culture. So you often see studios and companies mirroring or reflecting that culture back at them in order for them not to risk public shaming or outrage, activism, or headlines. That is cultural risk. Now, what I find most interesting is how Ubisoft found themselves in a dire position, a dire place whereby they had no other choice but to bend, kiss the ring, and capitulate. And that happened during 2020, during the Me Too movement. You see, during 2020, the industry-wide reckoning of the Me Too movement swept through the industry. And there were multiple allegations of sexual harassment that were levied on Ubisoft. And it involved senior or high-ranking staff. We're talking creative directors, vice presidents, HR figures. And guy, when we actually take a look at the stuff that these allegations allege that these high-ranking executives were actually doing, it just borders on the absurd. We're talking exposure of pornography in open office plans. We're talking inappropriate touching and kissing, women being tied to chairs, humiliated, everything bordering on psychological abuse. It's insanity. You wonder as to how the hell could they have let this happen for so long and no one actually spoke out about it. It's crazy. So then you can imagine that as a company, when you go through such an event, a tumultuous event such as this one, it's most likely to leave a scar. And you're going to want to start doing things differently in order to protect your image and your reputation. Like, for example, as a result of this, Ubisoft became very risk averse. Mostly due to the fact that we had high-ranking officials and executives that were abusing their power. As a result, that will affect the people who are promoted into certain positions of power. There are certain ideologies that you're supposed to possess or have that is supposed to make the board members or the investors trust you, trust that you won't abuse your power. And it's one of the reasons as to why you get creative directors or managers or CEOs that are simply there to optimize the product or the game for their internal risk radars. And that's how you get butchered products. Because Ubisoft is no longer in the industry or the genre of creativity and taking risks. They don't do that anymore. Plus, negotiated compromise becomes structural or systemic. Stories that are deemed too risky or too offensive are cancelled in favor of stories that are more inclusive and more diverse. stories that won't lead to a backlash or headlines or a social media PR storm. And as a result of cultural pressure, Ubisoft decided to sanitize most of their products or the things that they were doing, which also involved being more risk averse and catering to the safest possible cultural norms, which led them right down the path to negotiated compromise. That's how we got here. When the corporate culture itself is sick, that sickness infuses with the very products they create, and it manifests as sanitization and self-censoring. So you could even call this the origin story of Ubisoft's cowardice, if you will. And Prince of Persia is not the only victim of this sickness or this disease. Negotiated compromise has infected the entire gaming industry. Most studios no longer even create to serve their customers or their fan bases. Products that are made or that are ruled by fear. And cultural risk is the new creative director of these companies. And like I said, this disease is everywhere. And what's coming next will make the Prince of Persia remake look like a bad case of chickenpox.